Drug killings have skyrocketed. 15,000 dead since early 2006, over 7,000 this year alone.
Come after us and we'll hang bodies up at noon in town as a warning, as a demonstration of who is in charge here.
Government officials say revenge killings complicate their efforts to attract new army and police recruits and raise fears among those already involved that their families are at risk if they continue to carry out the president's orders and take on the cartels to the bitter end.
In December 2009, cartel members broke into a Mexican family's home and took the lives of everyone who was asleep in the house. The event was not only gruesome, but also inhumane. It was an act of violence and passion. There was no question that these men were there to take lives. But why? What did this family do to deserve such an awful fate? What triggered this horrifying occurrence? And the answer is revenge. A member of this family was involved in the death of Arturo Beltran-Leyva, the leader of the Beltran-Leyva cartel. But let's start from the beginning to understand how this tragic story takes place. In the early 2000s, the narcotic trade became a growing force in Mexico, creating lots of trouble for people all over the country. However, it was impossible to stop them from expanding. It's an ongoing challenge for the government of Mexico to deal with these narcotic cartels because their numbers and armed forces can sometimes challenge the Mexican military. Therefore, the government has no choice but to tiptoe around them, taking the slow approach and hoping one day they could finally put an end to all the criminal activities. Except it never happens. Narcotic cartels are getting more powerful every day because there's almost no way to get rid of them. Whenever the military captures one crime boss or cartel leader, another person takes their place. And when the cartel loses its leader, it disbands into smaller groups. These organizations are like insects. They were there long before anyone moved in, and they'll be there long after everyone's moved out. Arturo Beltran-Leyva was one of them. Beltran-Leyva was born on September 27, 1961. His home state, Sinaloa, was a region known for its long-standing narcotic trade culture. To make matters even more intriguing, his family had significant connections to narcotics trafficking. At a young age, his brothers were already involved in the criminal world. Initially, Beltran-Leyva wanted to pursue a more legitimate career. He began working as a law enforcement officer. But the temptation of the narcotic trade was too strong, leading him to leave the force and join his brothers to become one of the country's most feared crime bosses. In the late 1990s, he began working for the Sinaloa cartel, one of Mexico's major narcotic cartels, forming a powerful alliance.
And the Sinaloa cartel, and under El Chapo's leadership, from the late 1980s, made the choice to rule through having support among local people that yes, you will kill your rivals, but you are not going to shoot up a disco full of people in doing so.
The Sinaloa cartel was known for its vast expansion and control over the major narcotic trafficking routes into the United States because, believe it or not, the U.S. is the #1 consumer of narcotics in the world. It's also well known due to its infamous leader, El Chapo, who was once one of the most wanted and dangerous crime bosses in both the U.S. and Mexico. El Chapo was sentenced to life in prison in 2019 in the U.S., but the Sinaloa cartel is still thriving. It's like the absence of their former leader did little to negatively impact this organization. Beltran-Leyva used to be a high-ranking member and hitman in the Sinaloa cartel since the early 1990s. By 2008, he managed to get into Mexico's political system using tactics like bribery and threats to gain secret information about the government's anti-narcotic missions. It's actually a very common thing for cartels to get information from high officials through bribery and intimidation, because these cartel members are sometimes wealthier and more powerful than law enforcement officials. Either these people accept the bribe and do what they're asked, or take the risk of being targeted and killed. Unfortunately, these are the circumstances that Mexican people have to live with. Beltran-Leyva successfully infiltrated the political system, and he used it to his advantage. In 2008, Beltran-Leyva decided to separate from the Sinaloa cartel to create their own narcotic criminal organization, the Beltran-Leyva cartel. The reason why they named it the Beltran-Leyva cartel was because it was established by Arturo Beltran and his 3 brothers, Alberto, Carlos, and Hector Beltran-Leyva. Yes, This man has 3 other brothers who were also hitmen and narcotic smugglers. All of them used to be high-ranking members and lieutenants of the Sinaloa cartel. Basically, the 4 brothers separated themselves from a major corporation to start their own business. The brothers decided to separate from the Sinaloa cartel because of an incident involving one of them, Alfredo Beltran, also known as El Mochomo, who was captured by the Mexican authorities in January 2008. The brothers suspected El Chapo had set up Alfredo to be arrested by the military. Therefore, they decided to break away from the cartel and joined an alliance with the notorious Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas, who were rivals of the Sinaloa. It's still unclear whether El Chapo was really responsible for Alfredo's arrest, but the damage was already done. The brothers left with their lieutenants, one of whom was Edgar Valdez Villarreal, aka La Barbie. In 2006, La Barbie, who was still working for the Sinaloa cartel, released footage of himself brutally hurting and killing members of the Los Zetas gang. And now that his new leader was in alliance with the Los Zetas, it must have been quite awkward for them to work together. However, in the cartel world, there's really no such thing as an alliance or teamwork. It's more like a friends with benefits kind of relationship. They get what they need, then they dump you, or even betray you. At this point, Beltran-Leyva had a reputation for being a ruthless drug lord, responsible for narcotics production, transportation, and distribution within the cartel. His organization controlled numerous narco-trafficking corridors into the United States and was responsible for money laundering, gun running, and other acts of violence against men, women, and children in Mexico. He was also connected with the assassinations of numerous Mexican law enforcement officials. By the mid-2000s, he was one of the most wanted criminals in Mexico, and there was a $2 million bounty for his capture. As you can see, the crime boss was climbing the ladder of the criminal world. However, he failed to realize that his downfall was coming very soon. On December 11, 2009, Beltran-Leyva decided to throw an early but extravagant Christmas party for all his peers and friends. The party was beyond excessive and luxurious. He hired famous artists and exotic dancers to help make his party more lively. You can only imagine, it looked like a bachelor party from a movie. Keep in mind that this man might not have been one of the top kingpins in the world, but he's still a successful narcotic trafficker, which means he has plenty of money to waste. Even his lieutenants were extremely wealthy. Therefore, this man is probably worth more than some celebrities. Beltran-Leyva's net worth cannot be calculated properly because his money was made through illegal sources, but he was definitely worth millions. So Beltran-Leyva and his men were celebrating another year of accomplishment. But what they didn't know was that the Mexican Navy had their eyes on them at this point. The Navy raided the home where the party was taking place and engaged in a gunfight with the cartel members. They arrested some of the bodyguards and confiscated a large amount of money and weapons. Sadly, there were some casualties in this pursuit, including some of the bodyguards and innocent bystanders. Still, the Navy was unable to capture Beltran-Leyva. The cartel leader had escaped during the commotion and couldn't be located. It took the officials an extra 5 days to track him down again. This time, they weren't going to allow him to escape. On December 16, 2009, the Mexican Navy enlisted the help of the Marines to ambush the cartel leader at another one of his luxurious residences. The attack was extremely unforgiving and massive. The fight lasted for more than an hour and resulted in many deaths. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the Marines confirmed that the leader of the Beltran-Leyva cartel was dead. The death of Arturo Beltran-Leyva could be seen as a victory for the Mexican military and government. But in the process of taking this man down, there were too many innocent people who lost their lives in the line of fire. Additionally, there were soldiers who were severely wounded in the raid, and one of them lost his life. This brings us to Melchizedek Angulo Cordova, one of the main characters of this story.
Come after us and we'll hang bodies up at noon in town as a warning, as a demonstration of who is in charge here.
Melchizedek Angulo Cordova lost his life on the same day as Arturo Beltran-Leyva during the gunfight with the cartel. After they confirmed that the cartel leader was dead, the wounded soldiers got medical treatment for their injuries, but Cordova didn't make it. The news brought waves of sadness and depression to Cordova's family and the community. They had just learned that a Marine had lost his life fighting in the narcotic war. We don't know much about Cordova, except he was only 30 years old when he passed away. On December 21, 2009, Cordova was given a grand funeral and was buried with the highest military honors in the state of Tabasco. The event was supposed to be an honorable occasion, not only for Cordova, but for his family as well. He was seen as a hero of the country. However, it triggered an unwanted chain of troubles for the Cordova family. The nightmare had only just begun. A few hours after the funeral was over, the Cordova home was invaded. Multiple unidentified men broke down the family's front door in the middle of the night and opened fire at the people in the home, including Cordova's mother, sister, brother, and aunt. It was later revealed that the attack was an act of revenge by the Beltran-Leyva cartel. They believed that Cordova was one of the people who took their leader's life, so they had to avenge him by taking the lives of his family members, which is pure savagery. The cartel's revenge attack was nothing short of a nightmare. They were so fueled with the desire for retaliation that they came at the Cordova family with such brutality and violence that did nothing except create more chaos and madness.
More than a dozen gunmen busted down the door of this home in the eastern Mexican state of Tabasco with a sledgehammer. They immediately went to the bedrooms where their victims lay sleeping.
In the midst of trying to exert violence and revenge, the cartel people forgot that the person involved in the raid that led to Beltran-Leyva's death had also died. By attacking and killing the grieving family, it did nothing to help or better the situation. What they did was commit blind killings, hoping it would scare the people and authorities into backing away from cartel activities.
Government officials say revenge killings complicate their efforts to attract new army and police recruits and raise fears among those already involved that their families are at risk if they continue to carry out the president's orders and take on the cartels to the bitter end.
The incident sent communities into shock, mostly military families, because of the fear of being targeted by a criminal organization. It made many people feel insecure. Usually when your loved ones are serving the country, you're worried about them and their safety. Despite the horrifying attack in 2009, the Mexican government still struggled to enforce effective security measures to ensure the safety of military personnel and their loved ones. Many military families live in exposed, vulnerable conditions without proper protection. Additionally, Mexico faces challenges in providing sufficient resources and protection for military families. The government often lacks the funding, manpower, and supplies required to provide security. Now soldiers have to worry about their families being harmed because they're putting their lives on the line for their nation, which is absurd. No one should have to worry about their families' lives being threatened because of their career. It still blows some people's minds that this incident even happened. Military personnel and soldiers' identities are usually kept a secret for safety reasons, yet Cordova's identity was revealed through his honorable funeral. And no, his funeral wasn't a bad thing. It was a noble occasion that was well deserved. The country of Mexico only wanted to honor a hero who lost his life while on duty. In no way was the funeral or the act of commemorating Cordova a mistake. It was the publicity. Due to Cordova being honored, his name and his family were given a lot of publicity, for the right reasons, of course. But it also provided the cartel the family's information, leading to their deaths. The incident wasn't only a terrorizing act for the family, but for the people of Mexico as well. The revenge attack marked an escalation of violence and a turning point in the narcotic war, pushing the conflict between the cartel and the Marines to even higher levels of violence. The local population found themselves living in constant fear with the violence threatening the very peace of their communities.
Estos condenables hechos.
These reprehensible events are a display of the lack of scruples with which organized crime operates, preying on innocent people. This only spurs us to redouble our efforts to root out this singular cancer from our social life.
Faced with the ongoing violence from the cartels, the Mexican government made a big push to fight back against these powerful criminal organizations. They increased the efforts of law enforcement, which led to some intense confrontations happening all over the country. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were some serious problems, like corruption in the system, not having enough resources, and the cartel's ability to bounce back and adapt. Nevertheless, the trouble didn't just stay within Mexico's borders. You had narcotics money and weapons flowing across the US and Mexican borders, making everyone nervous. Even international organizations were scratching their heads, trying to figure out how to handle this crisis effectively. And the impact on Mexican society was unbearable. Communities were ripped apart, Families were forced to leave their homes, and the memories of loved ones being brutally killed haunted survivors. This wasn't just about physical scars, it ran much deeper. The emotional and social wounds might take forever to heal. This brutal war between the cartel and the Marines, all because of revenge for Arturo Beltran-Leyva's death, just shows how bad things can get in Mexico's narcotic war. Even though the Beltran-Leyva cartel disbanded after these series of events, it still serves as a reminder of the violence and ruthlessness that's become all too common. This situation calls for countries to work together to take serious steps to fight narcotic-related organized crime, not just in Mexico, but in the whole region. Do you think other countries should get involved in helping Mexico get rid of its cartels and narcotics problem? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.